Hello students, and welcome to this video presentation for the turning points of World War II. Yesterday we talked a lot about the Axis powers and how they gained a lot of territory very quickly due to the Blitzkrieg and some surprise attacks by their different allies. Today we're going to look at how the allies are going to strike back and kind of turn the fight towards a victory eventually for the Allies. Just a reminder about who the Allies and the Axis powers are. The Allies are currently down, but they're not necessarily out for long as they start to rebuild their forces and actually take it to the Axis powers. Here is where Hitler currently stands in relation to his conquest. He has conquered more than anyone has ever conquered in the history of Europe. His land, his conquests are even larger than Napoleon. So at this point, we are looking about how to reverse this trend in Europe against Hitler. The first thing that needs to be done is the United States needs to get involved in this war. At the very end of our last segment, the United States was attacked at Pearl Harbor by a surprise attack by the Japanese, plunging us into World War II, a war that we did not necessarily want to be a part of. When we do get involved, though, it is tremendous what we're able to do. 20 million men are drafted or volunteer within the first 6 months after the attack, and our entire economy is transformed. We are no longer going to really build cars anymore. Instead, we're going to build tanks and things known as Jeeps, something we'll look at in class. Plus, all that unemployment from the Great Depression that we had virtually disappears as we gear up for war. You're going to see that throughout this war. Again, Americans are really good at war, but also we're really good at just having materials for war, and we produce a tremendous amount of stuff. And so when we do that, our army tends to win when we can outproduce the other. One of the first key battles of World War II when the Allies strike back is going to be the Atlantic Ocean. The German U-boat has been absolutely devastating to Atlantic travel and trade between the United States and Great Britain and France. So we're going to try and beat that. We're going to develop things like the convoy system and a new ship known as a destroyer, which is going to be able to, it's specifically designed to defeat U-boats. That, in combination with depth charges, is going to lead to a Allied victory. Again, this isn't necessarily because we have superior technology or whatever. It's mostly because we just have so many ships that the U-boats can't sink them all, and eventually we do sink enough of theirs to really make a difference. Our second key battle is going to be Stalingrad. At Stalingrad, the Germans invaded the Soviet Union to attempt to push the boundaries of their empire into kind of the next phase. However, the Russian army, its massive size, was able to stop them at two key points, Leningrad and Stalingrad. At Stalingrad is going to be the epic battle between the Germans and the Soviet Union. For months and months, the Russians are going to be able to fight against the Germans in house-to-house fighting. Again, the Germans are far superior in every regard in military training, equipment, everything, but the Russians just have so many more men, and so it kind of evens out. The exact same strategy happened in World War I with the Russians against the Germans. The Russian winter is actually going to stop the Germans. And then the Soviet army is going to be able to fight back. Eventually, November 1942, the Russians are going to counterattack, and in that counterattack, they're going to capture 90,000 German troops. Kind of the overall outcome of this is going to be an overall turning point in the whole war. Not very much is said about Stalingrad because it's not the United States, but really Stalingrad was the turning point in the entire war. After the German defeat at Stalingrad, the entire eastern front of the German armies are going to start retreating back to Germany, and the Russians are going to start pushing towards Germany. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on Hitler. Our third key battle is going to be the Normandy invasions. Now, this is going to be the Allies opening up a second front against Hitler on the ground. Now that the Russians have begun their invasion of Poland and then eventually into Germany, we're going to land 130,000 troops in one day at a beach called Normandy Beach in northern France. We're going to talk a lot more about this in class, but mostly they're going to be United States troops, but they're going to be combined with British and Canadian troops. Going to be some of the heaviest fighting that's going to go on the beaches of Omaha and Utah beaches. However, within just a couple weeks after the initial landings, the United States forces, French forces, and British forces are going to be able to push back into Paris and liberate most of the French people. Once they liberate Paris, the Germans are going to be in full retreat on the Western Front as well. So within just about 18 months to 2 years, we went from complete Axis dominance in Europe and Asia to now in Europe, the Germans being squeezed from both the Eastern and Western Front towards mainland Germany. Germany's going to be in full retreat in the West. Our final battle here that we're going to talk about is going to be the Battle of Midway Island. It's going to be a naval and aircraft battle at the small island chain known as Midway. At Midway, we had a little tiny Air Force and naval base that we used to kind of refuel and re-equip our planes. It is kind of the last major stronghold that the United States has in the Pacific now that Hawaii has been pretty much knocked out. We did have those 3 aircraft carriers that survived Pearl Harbor, and we put those to the test. We had broken the Japanese code, so we knew that they were going to attack Midway. So just as the Japanese begin to assault Midway Island, we launch our aircraft off these new things called aircraft carriers, which are pretty cool. There you go. These aircraft carriers hold 50, 60 planes, and they launched all of those at the Japanese fleet. When the Japanese planes return and they're being refueled and rearmed on their aircraft carriers, that's when we strike. And that is the most vulnerable time for an aircraft carrier. So when we hit them at that time, it has absolutely a devastating impact. We sink 4 of their aircraft carriers to only losing 1 of our own. We sink several other large ships. This devastating blow to the Japanese fleet is going to send them in a retreat back to Japan. They are no longer on the offensive. They are now on the defensive. So we are now on the offensive in Europe. Germany's on the defensive against both Russia and the United States, France, Great Britain. And now in the Pacific, the United States is on the offensive and the Japanese are on the defensive. So we've completely turned the tide within 2 years of beginning offensive. We have turned the tide against the Axis powers. Now, in the Pacific, our primary strategy is going to be known as island hopping. Since all these tiny little islands are owned by Japanese and they are occupied by Japanese soldiers, we have a very strict policy of bombarding the island, sending the Marines, sweeping the island clean of Japanese soldiers, and then setting up a naval and air base there, then moving on to the next island. It's a very methodical plan that slowly gets us closer and closer to Japan, where eventually we can start bombarding large-scale Japanese cities. It's going to be a very effective strategy, and it's going to allow us to concentrate our entire Marine Corps and Navy on a single target instead of trying to attack multiple ones at the same time. One of the examples of this island hopping campaign is going to be the islands of Iwo Jima. It's only supposed to last about a month, but it ends out lasting. It's only supposed to last about a week, but it ends up lasting a month. We are going to lose a tremendous amount of American lives during that time, but it's going to show us how much resolve the Japanese have towards defending their islands. So that's kind of the end of the key battles of World War II. You just need to make sure that you can identify each one of those and their importance to the overall conflict. Make sure to do your quiz, and I will see you tomorrow.